Some people wake up feeling like they've slept for hours, yet carry a tiredness that runs deeper than their bones. It's not just physical, it's emotional, mental, spiritual. The smile on their face hides a mind that's foggy, a heart that feels disconnected, and a motivation that seems to have quietly disappeared. They look fine on the outside, but something inside feels stuck. And maybe you know that feeling too. You try to push through the day, you go through the motions, but joy doesn't come as easily as it used to. Even small tasks feel like mountains. And the worst part, you don't know why. But here's the truth. It's not just stress. It's not just a bad week. In many cases, it's your inner chemistry calling for attention. Your mind isn't broken, it's just imbalanced. And one of the quiet forces behind your energy, focus, and emotional strength is dopamine. In the teachings of the Buddha, we are reminded that suffering is not always loud. It can be a slow drift away from ourselves, away from balance. The good news is we can return. There are powerful but gentle ways to rebuild that balance and rediscover the sense of aliveness we thought we lost. This video is not about chasing quick happiness. It's about reconnecting with the foundations of inner peace, emotional clarity, and mental energy, using timeless Buddhist wisdom and modern insight. So stay with me. Don't skip any part of this video because every step we cover today is a piece of the puzzle, a small act of returning to your center. And if you find value in what we're doing here, if this helps you even a little, there's a simple free favor I'll ask of you. Hit the subscribe button. That small act helps more people find this space. And more importantly, it tells your own mind, I'm ready to feel better, one step at a time. There's a certain heaviness that creeps in when we've been still for too long. Not the peaceful kind of stillness that the Buddha spoke of in meditation, but the kind that comes from emotional fatigue, stress, and feeling overwhelmed. It's a stillness that doesn't restore, it stagnates. You sit in one place, maybe scrolling through your phone, maybe staring at a screen, maybe just feeling too weighed down to move. And even though the body rests, the mind becomes louder, heavier, more tangled. But here's what we often forget. The body and mind are not separate. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "The body is the chariot, the mind the reins. The driver is consciousness. When the body remains frozen, the mind starts spiraling. And when we allow gentle movement back into our life, it's like we're guiding that chariot back onto the path. You don't have to run a marathon or do anything dramatic. In fact, it's the soft, slow, intentional movements that often bring the most healing. A simple stretch in the morning, a short walk in the evening, stepping outside and feeling the breeze. These might seem small, but they are signals to your nervous system that say, I'm here, I'm safe, I'm moving forward. Scientifically, movement increases dopamine, a natural way for your brain to say, thank you for taking care of me. But spiritually, it's even deeper. Every step you take becomes a mindful return to the present moment. Just like the Buddha's walking meditations, where every footstep is an opportunity to anchor the mind, your movement becomes a practice in awareness. And yet, when we feel down, what do we usually do? We stop. We curl inward. We isolate. Movement becomes the last thing we want to do, when it's exactly what we need most. Think about it. When you're anxious, your body feels tight. When you're sad, you feel sluggish. When you're stressed, your shoulders rise and your breath shortens. These are signs that your emotions are not just in your mind, they are living in your body, and that means they need a way out, not through overthinking, not through distraction, but through motion, through breath, through release. It's okay if you don't feel like doing a full workout. You don't have to measure your steps or count calories. Let go of the performance mindset. This isn't about achievement. It's about restoration. The Buddha never said, move to prove. He taught that balance lies in the middle path, in gentle, sustainable actions that bring harmony. so give yourself permission to move without pressure. Let movement be a kind of medicine, not a punishment. Roll your shoulders back, stretch your neck, walk barefoot across the floor and feel the ground beneath you. Let your breath guide you. If you can, go outside, even if it's just for a few minutes. Let nature meet your senses. Watch how the light changes, listen to how your footsteps sound. These moments bring you back to life. There's a moment we've all experienced when life feels a little too loud, emotions feel a little too heavy, and without even realizing it, we find ourselves standing in front of the fridge. Not because we're hungry, not because our body needs fuel, but because we're searching for something to soothe the ache inside us. A taste, a crunch, a momentary comfort to distract us from sadness, boredom, or stress. And in that moment, food becomes more than food. It becomes an emotional escape. We've been conditioned to feed our feelings instead of facing them. But what if, instead of reaching outward, we turned inward with awareness? Buddhist teachings remind us that suffering often arises not from the thing itself, but from how we relate to it. When we eat to numb our discomfort, we're not resolving anything, we're only delaying the conversation with ourselves. The Buddha taught the path of mindfulness not just as a meditation on a cushion, but as a way of living, eating included. Every action, when done with awareness, becomes an opportunity for awakening. And that includes the simple, sacred act of nourishing our bodies. There's a deep wisdom in asking ourselves, why am I eating right now? Am I truly hungry? Or am I trying to avoid a feeling I don't want to face? That question isn't about guilt, it's about clarity. Because when we eat in response to emotions, especially with processed or sugary foods, we're not just filling our stomachs, we're altering our brain chemistry. Dopamine spikes quickly and crashes just as fast, and what follows is often fatigue, fog, or even more craving. It's a cycle that tricks us into thinking we feel better, when in truth, we're only slipping further from balance. On the other hand, when we approach food with mindfulness, with calm attention and care, we shift everything. We begin to notice what nourishes us and what drains us. We become aware of how different foods make us feel, not just immediately, but hours later. The Buddha often emphasized the middle path. Not too much, not too little. That wisdom can be applied directly to the way we eat. It's not about strict diets or food rules. It's about learning how to listen to your body without the noise of stress and emotion clouding your decision. And yes, this takes practice. It takes time to pause when your instinct says, I need comfort food, and to instead ask, what do I actually need? Sometimes it's a walk, sometimes it's silent, sometimes it's just a few deep breaths to come back to yourself. When you eat with intention, you send your body a message. I care about how I feel, not just in this moment, but later too. That's a quiet form of self-love. That's emotional maturity. And that's how you begin to restore your inner balance, not through force, but through kindness. Think about beginning your day with foods that truly support you. Warm tea, nourishing grains, fresh fruit, a source of protein. Not because it's trendy, but because it helps your mind stay clear. Because it gives your dopamine system the raw materials it needs to work properly. You don't need to count every calorie. You need to build a connection to how food makes you feel. That's a deeper kind of health. That's a different kind of power. There's something deeply unsettling about lying in bed at night, exhausted yet unable to rest. Your body aches for sleep, but your mind refuses to settle. Thoughts loop endlessly, regrets from the day, plans for tomorrow, conversations that never happened, all swirling like wind in a quiet room. And even if you manage to drift off, you wake up feeling no better. It's as if your rest did nothing. That's not just a coincidence, it's a sign that the body isn't healing, that the mind isn't resetting. And in today's world, this has become painfully common. We glorify hustle, we applaud productivity, but somewhere along the way, we forgot how to truly rest. In Buddhism, rest is not laziness, it is wisdom. The Buddha taught that balance, or samma, is the middle way. Not excess, not deprivation, just presence, rhythm, alignment. He knew that without rest, the mind becomes scattered, reactive, clouded. The body can't carry the spirit when it's worn down. And yet we treat sleep like it's optional, like it's something we'll earn after we finish everything else. But what if you shifted that belief? What if you began to see sleep not as a pause in life, but as an essential part of it, a sacred rhythm that nourishes your soul? Your brain is a miraculous instrument, but like any powerful tool, it needs maintenance. During sleep, your brain performs what scientists call neural housekeeping. It clears toxins, resets hormones, and repairs emotional pathways, especially those related to dopamine. And dopamine, as we've explored, is key to feeling motivated, calm, and mentally resilient. But without real sleep, not just hours in bed, but deep, undisturbed rest, your brain's ability to produce and receive dopamine breaks down. This is why everything feels harder after a bad night. Your patience fades, your energy collapses. Even small problems feel like disasters. It's not a weakness, it's chemistry. Think about it. How many times have you stayed up late just trying to get a little more done? One more message, one more task, one more scroll through your feed. We think we're being productive, but we're stealing from the next day. We're borrowing energy we don't have and paying for it with our peace. And it's not just about how long you sleep, it's about how well you sleep, the quality, the rhythm, the way you ease into it. Sleep begins long before your head hits the pillow. It begins with how you end your day. The Buddha often retreated into silence before resting. He honored the transition from activity to stillness. And you can do the same. Dim your lights an hour before bed. Put your phone away, not just out of reach, but out of sight. Let your nervous system slow down. Try deep breathing or a short body scan. Let each exhale be a release of the day. Remind yourself that nothing needs to be solved right now. The day is done, and your rest is your offering back to the body that carried you through it. There's a strange discomfort that comes with being alone, not physically alone, but alone with your own thoughts. For many of us, the quiet is almost unbearable. The moment the noise stops, the mind gets louder, memories rise, doubts whisper, feelings you've buried for days or even years start to surface. And because we're not used to that silence, we run. We reach for a screen, a task, a distraction, anything to avoid simply sitting with ourselves. But the truth is, silence isn't the enemy. In fact, it may be the very thing we've been needing all along. Buddhist teachings have long recognized the power of stillness. The Buddha didn't attain enlightenment in the middle of a crowd or while multitasking. He sat beneath the Bodhi tree, alone, in deep meditation, not to escape the world but to face it through himself. The practice wasn't about emptying the mind of all thought, it was about becoming familiar with what's already there. Buddhism teaches that the root of suffering is attachment, and so often our attachment is not just to people or possessions. It's to the endless noise we use to avoid facing our inner world. Silence gently loosens that grip. When you allow yourself to sit in silence, you create space. Space between the impulse and the action. Space between your thoughts and your identity. Instead of being swept away by emotions, you begin to notice them. You witness the mind stories, but you don't become them. And that witnessing, that simple act of observing without judgment, is the beginning of real clarity. It's not always comfortable, but it is always honest. We tend to think of stillness as doing nothing, but stillness is not emptiness, it's awareness, it's presence. When you sit quietly, you're not wasting time. You're reconnecting with the deepest part of yourself. You're giving your nervous system a chance to slow down, your breath a chance to deepen, your heart a chance to be heard. And the incredible thing is, your brain responds. Studies now confirm what monks have practiced for centuries. Intentional silence and meditation increase dopamine and serotonin levels. You feel more centered, more energized, not because you've escaped life, but because you've returned to it with a clearer lens. Let's be honest, at first it might feel awkward. You'll get restless. Your mind will wander. You might even feel emotional. That's okay. That's part of the process. The goal isn't to have a perfect experience. It's to build a relationship with yourself, a kind, honest one. Even 5 minutes a day can change how you move through the world. You'll find yourself less reactive, more patient, not because life gets easier, but because you're stronger inside. You don't need to sit cross-legged on a mountaintop. You don't need candles or incense. Just find a space, any space, where you can be undisturbed for a few moments. Close your eyes. Feel your breath. When your mind wanders, gently bring it back. You don't need to stop your thoughts. Just stop believing every one of them. Over time, you'll begin to notice the silence behind the noise, the spaciousness that was always there, waiting. Some days, it feels like you're standing still while the world races ahead of you. You set goals, you make promises to yourself, but somehow you keep slipping. And that feeling, that quiet sense of failure, starts to become familiar. It whispers things like, I'm not disciplined enough, or I'm just not motivated like other people. But let's pause that self-judgment for a moment. Because what if the problem isn't that you're lazy or lacking willpower? What if the problem is that you're trying to leap mountains before you've learned how to take the first step with care? In the teachings of the Buddha, transformation is not some sudden lightning strike. It's a slow unfolding, a leaf opening to the sun, a mind returning to clarity, one breath at a time. The path is walked step by step, not all at once. This truth applies not only to spiritual liberation, but to everything we want to change in our lives. One of the gentlest, yet most powerful ways to start feeling like yourself again is to set simple, meaningful intentions and honor them as if they matter, because they do. Dopamine, the chemical that helps us feel rewarded, energized, and emotionally alive, doesn't wait for the grand finish line. It responds to progress, real, visible, acknowledged progress. When you do something small and say to yourself, yes, I did that, you are not only creating momentum, you are retraining your nervous system to believe in forward movement again. This is something even monks understand on the cushion. The discipline of sitting in silence each morning, even for just 10 minutes, is an intention, and each time it's followed through, it strengthens resolve, not through pressure, but through practice. But here's where most people get it wrong. They set goals so big that the mind instantly freezes. I'll wake up at 5 a.m. every day for a year. I'll quit sugar forever. I'll write a book in a month. These goals might look impressive on paper, but they often overwhelm our emotional system before they've even begun. In Buddhism, we're reminded to begin where we are. If the cup is full, you must first empty it. If your energy is low, if your spirit feels tender, don't demand big leaps. Ask instead, what small act of love can I give to myself today? Maybe it's a full glass of water upon waking. Maybe it's 5 deep breaths before opening your phone. Maybe it's pausing just once before reacting to stress. These seem minor, but they are not. These are foundational shifts, and when you acknowledge them, when you say, I did that, you begin to build a quiet self-trust, one that doesn't depend on dramatic change, but on consistency. And that consistency leads to something beautiful, dignity, a sense that you are showing up for your own life, not for praise, not for performance, but because your peace matters. Let me say this clearly. Celebrating small wins is not self-indulgent. It's not silly. It's sacred. It's how you tell your own mind, I am moving forward. The Buddha never encouraged harshness toward the self. He taught us to observe, to adjust, to stay with the breath and return again when we drift. That's what these small goals are, a return, a reclaiming of our ability to shape our inner world one act at a time. There are moments when words fall short, when your heart is heavy, but you can't explain why, when your mind feels cluttered, but no amount of thinking brings clarity. In these moments, something as simple as a melody can shift everything, not because it solves the problem, but because it speaks to the part of you that's still listening beneath the noise. Music reaches places inside us that even our thoughts can't touch. It doesn't ask you to figure things out. It doesn't ask for performance. It just enters gently, unnoticed at first. And then suddenly, you breathe a little deeper, feel a little softer, and remember that you're human. In Buddhist tradition, sound is sacred. From the chanting of sutras to the soft ring of a meditation bell, sound has always been more than a background element. It's a tool for awakening. Buddha understood that the senses can either distract or guide. When used with intention, sound becomes a bridge from distraction to mindfulness. When you chant, you're not just repeating words. You're aligning your mind, body, and breath. And the same is true for music, whether it's a song you grew up with or a new melody that seems to understand your current emotion better than you do. Music carries a wisdom that transcends thought. Think about a time when a song brought you to tears, not from sadness, but from resonance. That's not a weakness. That's recognition. It's your inner world responding to something pure. Neuroscience confirms this. Music stimulates dopamine in the brain, the same chemical responsible for motivation, pleasure, and emotional stability. But this isn't about science as much as it is about the soul. When you find music that speaks to your inner life, it doesn't just pass time, it transforms it. It takes a tired moment and breathes life into it. It takes a heavy day and wraps it in compassion. But here's the key. Don't just let music play in the background of your day like wallpaper. Choose it intentionally. Curate it like you would a sacred space. In the same way a monk might choose a mantra for morning practice, you can choose a song to open your heart, to settle your mind, or to awaken your spirit. Not every track needs to be uplifting. Sometimes it's the sorrowful ones that release what's been held in too long. And that's okay. Buddha never taught us to run from emotion. He taught us to be present with it, to observe it without clinging or resistance. Music can be the companion that allows you to feel fully, without needing to explain. Create different soundscapes for your inner world. Maybe you have a playlist for quiet mornings, soft, gentle tunes that let you ease into your breath. Maybe there's one for movement, rhythms that awaken energy and clarity. Maybe there's even a collection for moments of grief, songs that hold you when nothing else can. This is not about controlling your mood, it's about honoring it, meeting yourself exactly where you are, with sound as your witness. There's a quiet shift that happens inside us every time we spend time with someone who truly sees us. Not someone who just hears the surface of our words, but someone who listens with their whole presence. You walk away from that conversation feeling lighter, steadier, even if nothing dramatic was said. There's a sense of being returned to yourself, of feeling a little more grounded. And then there are those other moments, when a single interaction leaves you emotionally drained, questioning yourself, or carrying a heaviness that wasn't there before. What changed wasn't your environment. It was the energy you allowed into your space. In the Buddha's teachings, it is said that our associations shape our path. A friend who points out your faults and corrects you is to be respected, as if he reveals a secret of hidden treasure, the Buddha once taught. But he also warned about the danger of keeping company with those who pull us away from mindfulness, compassion, and clarity. The people around us have more influence over our emotional and mental state than we often realize. They don't just affect our mood, they shape our mindset, The conversations you engage in, the energy you absorb, the values you're surrounded by, these all mold the state of your mind, and with it, your dopamine levels, your focus, and your motivation. Think of your nervous system like a sponge. It absorbs what it's most consistently exposed to. When you spend time in peaceful, kind, uplifting energy, your system begins to relax. You start to feel safer, more open, more capable of being yourself without defense. But when you're constantly around criticism, chaos, gossip, or emotional instability, your system tightens. You enter survival mode, even if you don't realize it. And the longer you stay in that energy, the more you start to shrink, not physically, but emotionally. Your joy quiets, your clarity fades. You begin to question your worth, your direction, even your sanity. Buddhist wisdom teaches that spiritual progress is not only about meditation or rituals, it's about wise association. Being around those who embody presence, honesty, and compassion reinforces those same qualities in us. It becomes easier to be kind when kindness surrounds you. It becomes easier to be mindful when you're not constantly defending yourself. And this is not about creating a perfect circle. It's about curating one that aligns with your path. It's about asking, who helps me stay connected to my inner peace? Who makes it easier to walk the eightfold path, not through words but through their presence? Now, this doesn't mean cutting everyone off or judging others harshly. It means becoming aware of how people affect you. After you've spent time with someone, pause and ask yourself, do I feel more myself or less? Do I feel inspired or drained? Do I feel safe or defensive? These questions aren't selfish, they're sacred. They're how you protect your peace. And protecting your peace is part of honoring your Dharma. Equally important is your role in this equation. Don't just seek uplifting energy, be uplifting energy. Listen without judgment, celebrate others without comparison, hold space without rushing to fix. Sometimes the most healing thing you can offer is simply your full attention. In doing so, you don't just change your relationships, you change the atmosphere around you. You become someone others feel safe around, someone who encourages alignment without even trying. That is the energy of compassion in action. That is the Buddha nature shining through. There's a kind of healing that doesn't come from words, pills, or even meditation. It comes from something much simpler, something so ordinary that we often overlook it completely. Stepping outside, feeling warmth on your face, letting the natural world meet your skin. In a time when so much of life happens behind glass, behind screens, walls, and artificial lights, it's easy to forget that your body was never meant to be confined to boxes. It was made to belong to the world, and the world, believe it or not, offers its own medicine, one of its oldest and most powerful forms, sunlight. You don't need to become a monk in a forest to experience the spiritual benefits of light. The Buddha himself attained awakening beneath the Bodhi tree, rooted in nature, face open to the elements. That moment wasn't a rejection of the world, it was a deep acceptance of it. And within that stillness, bathed in the gentle glow of morning sun, a deeper clarity emerged. There's wisdom in that image. Nature is not a backdrop to our lives, it is part of our inner alignment. And the sun, specifically, is not just light, it's a sacred rhythm, a signal, a gentle guide that can help reset your body, calm your mind, and lift your spirit, without effort, without striving. On a biological level, sunlight triggers a cascade of healing processes inside you. It boosts your production of dopamine, the very chemical that gives you motivation, pleasure, and focus. It helps regulate melatonin, which governs your sleep and mood. It supports vitamin D levels, which in turn impact immunity, energy, and overall brain health. These are not abstract ideas. They are real, measurable effects. But more than that, there's something emotional that happens when you let the sun touch you. Your shoulders drop, your breath slows, Your mind stops rushing to the next thing. You become present, not because you tried, but because nature pulled you gently back. In Buddhism, we often speak of interbeing, this idea that everything is connected. You are not separate from the sky, from the trees, from the light that breaks through the clouds. When you allow yourself to feel the sun on your skin, you're not just soaking up warmth, you're participating in a deeper truth, that you are part of something vast, living and sacred. The light that touches your body is the same light that nourishes every tree, flower and creature. That's not poetic, it's reality. And when you remember that, a part of you softens, the illusion of isolation fades, and a quiet sense of peace begins to return. There was likely a time in your life when you didn't need a reason to sing, dance, paint, write, or play. You didn't ask yourself, is this productive, or what will this lead to? You just did it because it felt good, because it felt like you. But somewhere along the way, perhaps without even noticing, we started trading joy for expectations. We were taught to prioritize what's necessary over what's nourishing, what's responsible over what's real. And slowly, the things that once made us feel alive got pushed to the bottom of the list. Days became a series of tasks, responsibilities and routines that leave little space for what truly lights us up inside. In Buddhism, the path isn't about escape, it's about returning to your true nature. The Buddha taught that joy is not something to chase, but something to uncover. He spoke often of the balance between effort and ease, of knowing when to act and when to simply be. When you do something that brings you joy, you're not being selfish or lazy. You're realigning with the part of yourself that is most awake, most connected to the present moment. Joy isn't a distraction from the spiritual path. It's a sign you're walking it. From a scientific perspective, engaging in activities that spark joy boosts dopamine in a way that is natural, sustainable, and healing. These aren't dopamine spikes that crash after. They're gradual releases that build emotional resilience. And here's the beautiful part. It doesn't have to be anything big or dramatic. Even 15 minutes of writing, gardening, sketching, cooking with love, or getting lost in a song can bring you back to yourself. The point is not the outcome. The point is the feeling. The return to a state where you're not performing, not proving, just being. Sometimes we forget who we are because we've been busy being who we think we have to be. But underneath all the pressure, all the labels, all the roles, there is still that person who finds peace in simple creation, in playful exploration. Buddhism reminds us that everything we need is already inside us, but we must make space for it to rise. Doing what you love creates that space. It clears the fog. It silences the inner critic. It allows your breath to deepen and your nervous system to soften. That's not indulgence, that's medicine. You might be thinking, I don't even know what brings me joy anymore. That's okay. Sometimes we become so detached from ourselves that the answer isn't obvious. But don't wait for clarity to begin. Experiment. Revisit old hobbies. Try something new without needing to be good at it. Remove the pressure to monetize or explain it. Let it be sacred simply because it nourishes you. Joy doesn't need justification, it needs permission. Some days it feels like you're carrying something invisible, but heavy. It's not always easy to explain. You show up for your responsibilities, you keep a brave face. You smile when people ask how you are. But inside, there's this tightness, maybe in your chest, maybe in your stomach, maybe just somewhere you can't quite name. And no matter how hard you try to push it down, it stays. This quiet weight is what so many of us live with. Stress that we never fully let go of. Emotions that we've convinced ourselves are too much. Thoughts we bottle up instead of breathe through. And after a while, it starts to feel normal to hold everything in. But this isn't strength, it's survival, and survival isn't the same as peace. In the teachings of the Buddha, suffering isn't always about pain. It's about the clinging, the resistance to what is. We suffer because we tense up against our emotions instead of allowing them to move. The Buddha showed us that the path to liberation isn't about avoiding life. It's about facing it with compassion and letting go of our grip. Stress, sadness, anger, these aren't enemies. They're messengers. They're signs that something in us needs attention, movement, and release. When we suppress these feelings, we don't erase them. We bury them. And buried emotions don't die. They live on in the body, in our breath, in our reactions, in our disconnection from joy. So how do we begin to let go? We start by giving ourselves permission to feel. That might sound simple, but most of us have spent years being taught to do the opposite. We've been told to stay strong, to keep going, to get over it. But Buddhist wisdom reminds us, true strength is not in resistance, it's in awareness. When you acknowledge what's there without judgment, you take the first step toward healing. That could mean placing a hand on your heart and simply naming what you feel. I'm overwhelmed. I'm hurt. I'm tired. You're not feeding the emotion, you're freeing it. You're letting it breathe so it can pass through. Sometimes release is physical, a slow, mindful walk, a few deep stretches, breathing in and out with intention. Movement allows trapped energy to flow again. Other times it's emotional, letting yourself cry without apology, speaking honestly with someone you trust, writing in a journal, not for performance, but to give your thoughts somewhere to land. And at times, it's spiritual, sitting in silence, chanting, offering your emotions to the universe or the divine, trusting that you don't have to carry it all alone. The Buddha often spoke of impermanence, the understanding that all things rise and fall, including our feelings. To release is to trust that what you feel right now is not forever. It is moving if you let it. Peace doesn't always come with a loud revelation. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet decision to stop holding what no longer belongs to you. Every breath you release is a step closer to who you truly are, beneath the weight, beneath the noise. So take that breath now and let yourself return. Thank you for walking this path with me and for being a part of Buddhist journey. If this spoke to your heart, there's another video on your screen that I believe your soul is ready for. Go ahead and watch it next. I'll meet you there.